very much, Sophie. I appreciate the opportunity, and I want to thank you, thank Daphne Daly and Gane Jope from the planning department, but primarily thank Sophie for all of her hard work and not only making sure that many people in the community are engaged in this process, but also leading this planning effort for sustainable communities. Planning is very, very proud to have so many people involved. This really is about you. It's about your plan and what the future is for Catonsville and the surrounding communities. So I know we're into the second meeting and many of you are maybe on for the first time, but I can't thank all of you enough for giving a part of your evening to be part of this process so we can work with you to put forward the priorities that you and your neighbors see as important for Catonsville. So once again, thank you, Sophie, for the opportunity, and thank you for your leadership on this effort. And I look forward to hearing from you and the others this evening. I will have to bow at about 7 o'clock or a little bit before that, but I'm eagerly going to await what I hear over the next hour or so. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Steve, for sharing. 1 second. I just got to make sure somebody can get in real quick. Sorry about that. 1 moment. All right. All right. So, Emery, you can go to the next slide. So thank you, Steve, again for sharing. For those of you that joined us last week, thank you and welcome back. And for those of you joining for the first time, welcome in. As you know, we are here tonight to discuss 2 topics of the Catonsville Sustainable Communities Plan, housing and local planning and land use. We will discuss each topic one at a time, starting with housing for the first 40 minutes, and then moving on to local planning and land use for the second half for 40 minutes as well. During each of those discussions, we will talk about what was said in the 2018 application, what some of the takeaways from the kickoff survey were about these topics, and then get into having a group conversation about what you feel should be priorities and what the strengths and weaknesses of each of those topics are. So I'll go and give a quick informational intro. Emery, you can go to the next slide. So on the call tonight, not only do we have our SC work group members and members of the Catonsville community who have all been so helpful in contributing to the process, but we also have a few representatives from our county agencies so that they can answer any questions that may come up and provide some insight into what they're working on. And we also have a few representatives, I'm not sure if they are here yet, from Community Assistance Network, which is a countywide organization. Add some people in. You can go to, oh, perfect. Again, briefly, for those of you who are not familiar with the program yet, Sustainable Communities is a state designation program that designated communities must renew every 5 years. By maintaining this designation, eligible organizations, for example, 501c3s, have access to various state grants and loan programs, such as Community Legacy, that support the revitalization of the community. And the chart on the right here has a few of those grants that are available. And I'm happy to talk more about that if anybody has specific questions later on. You can go to the next slide. So this is our current boundary for the Catonsville Sustainable Community. The blue is the existing and the yellow part is what we are proposing to expand to. The discussions of all of these topics for every focus group meeting will be focused on this area as a whole, so both the blue and yellow parts. And that brings us to our first topic, housing. So you can go to the next slide. Perfect. So this is just a reminder of what the format of the action plan is. So you can see there are 3 components: strengths, weaknesses, and then desired outcomes with relevant strategies and partners. The topic of housing itself is focused on the homes in which people in the community live and the efforts to make that easier for them and to find and stay in those homes. Some of the strengths and weaknesses and outcomes can focus on affordability, increasing homeownership, increasing rental housing, diversifying the kinds of housing available, improving housing conditions, housing programs, aging in place, preventing foreclosures, and reducing residential vacancies, and more. Anything that has to do with housing in those ways. You can go to the next slide. So as we go through the previous plan, think about those statements and how they reflect the current situation of the community. How would you revise it? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What would you change? And so forth. So from our kickoff survey, which got 84 survey responses, these are some of the things that appeared repeatedly throughout those categories. For the strengths, people said that the community has a small town feel, not too high density, well-kept neighborhoods, diversity of housing types and stability of housing value. There are historic homes. Some of the weaknesses that were mentioned were a lack of affordable housing, increased homelessness, and a need for more senior housing, and a need for permission to have ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Some of the outcomes that survey takers selected primarily revolved around ensuring quality affordable housing was available and improving housing conditions in those areas with higher proportions of rental housing. Some of the other things that people brought up were increasing senior housing, increasing environmentally friendly methods in the housing supply, allowing ADUs, and retrofitting vacant commercial space to be new housing. And with that, we can move on to focusing on strengths of housing. So listed on the slide here are the strengths that were listed in the 2018 action plan. And as you can see, it's pretty short list. There's only 2 listed there. The first one is wide range of housing options, single family homes, condos, apartments, and senior living facilities. And the second one was that housing value was strong overall and that median house values were higher than the countywide average. So with that, I think we're going to stop sharing the screen and kind of open up for discussion. You can raise your hand or just unmute yourself or type in the chat. What are some of the strengths that when it comes to housing in Catonsville? Yeah, so if anybody would like to kind of start it off and just unmute, feel free. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was muted. So I think one of the nice things about Catonsville is that we do have examples of middle, what's often referred to as the missing middle housing. Specifically, when we look at places in communities that we're thinking about expanding the district into, down on Plymouth and Orpington, where there's some really cute fourplexes on that street side by side with single family units. Great examples of what we should be considering evolving into streets with duplexes side by side next to single family dwellings, as well as these older homes that are carved up into essentially apartment, multifamily property units. Again, side by side with other things. And we're seeing these things mostly with not a lot of parking impact, that the streets, there's certainly capacity with the street. I would say that that's a strong, a strength that we have. And then the other strength is particularly, and it's a controversial topic, I'm sure, but, we have a lot of land here in terms of incremental development, in terms of the great amount of DR2 zoning. That's where I live, really large lots. And it's not a real efficient use of the land when we're talking about trying to, sustainably build communities. So, but, nevertheless, it's here, it's an opportunity, and it is a strength for building more walkable, bikeable communities by gently increasing the density here in the inner tier suburbs.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
Matthew, go ahead. Oh, I think you're muted.
Mute. So I'd say the diversity of our land use that's around our residential areas is a real strength. We have office parks, we have business centers, we have retail, we have a lot of different uses. You know, you go to some suburban communities and it's just sprawling homes, and you'll just have one, you know, one strip mall essentially for the region. And here, you know, you have mixed in, you have buildings that are 250 years old, you have old churches, you have, you know, you have main strips. You can buy a car here. You can also get a good meal, within walking distance, really. Uh, and our and you know how close we are to the city of Baltimore, you know, especially like the Route 40 corridor, you know, being able to, you know, you can get over to Hopkins as long as it is in rush hour, 15-20 minutes. I mean, it's, you know, there's a lot of advantages to this area when it comes to that. And really, at the end of the day, especially like our communities that are closer to the Beltway and within the Beltway, we have good density. I mean, we have enough density where, you know, doing things like putting sidewalks down or building a park, you know, that if we do something like that, because of that dense housing, it'll have a major impact.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing. Mike, do you want to go next?
Sure, but my dog's gonna bark in about 12 seconds because we're getting a delivery. But I wanted to build off sort of the comments about the density, and just like if you think about Catonsville, so much of what's in this boundary is within half a mile of bus routes, which I think is like a really big strength that we could capitalize on more. Is the public transit access is actually a lot better than people give it credit for, and you know that makes it ripe for a bit more density. And I also had a second point that now I don't remember, so I apologize for this scattered comment.
All good. Those are good points. Anybody else have anything to share? Ashley, I don't know if you have any kind of sense of something that you view as a strength, either countywide or for the western part of the county.
Sophie, do you mind if I make another comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
So certainly, you know, I mean, I can't help but when I look at, you know, the boundaries of this district, and see Spring Grove in there. And certainly a huge strength in terms of this developable parcel that's there that UMBC is going to be developing. Is anybody from UMBC or Whalen Properties on the call today? I didn't see Mr. Whalen.
I don't think they are on the call at the moment,
Okay.
but I can reach out to them separately.
Yeah. I mean, because, you know, I mean, it's a great strength in terms of specifically building capacity for, you know, affordable housing. You know, but, you know, I am concerned that, you know, I know from conversations that I've had with Mr. Whalen that he's not concerned about, he feels that there's a plethora of affordable housing in Catonsville. And I'm not sure, you know, UMBC's commitment to affordable housing. And, you know, one of the benefits of being in a sustainable community is expansion of what you can use TIF bonds for. And, you know, I think that it's both an incredible strength that we have this development opportunity there. And then, you know, I'll go on when we talk about the weakness, why I feel that's a weakness later on. But, you know, what a great opportunity for us to build some really robust housing, you know, across income levels.
You know, to add to Paul's point there, you know, there's something that has been done in some communities that might be helpful, which is, you know, like a grant for people who are purchasing homes, like a first-time home buyers grant for folks who work in the area. You know, the Hopkins has been doing for more than a decade, a live near your work grant in the communities nearby there. And maybe certain neighborhoods, if there is a, you know, if there's a low area with a low, you know, percentage of homeowners or something like that, we, you know, there could be a grant program to get some of our local people who are working locally into those places, whether it be at Social Security or UMBC, or even in some of these office parks in the area.
Yeah, that's a really good strategy to bring up. And I do see, Mike, you commented in the chat, Catonsville is a great example of a suburb done right, meaning that it's less dense than in an inner city neighborhood, but is dense enough that you can walk to access important amenities. That's a really good point. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? Ashley, I'm not sure if you wanted to chime in.
Thanks, Sophie. So I'm Ashley. I work in DHCD. I serve as Deputy Director. I will share with you guys a link of some of our housing opportunities and finance programs. You guys may be aware of them already. There are legacy down payment assistance programs. There's a live near your work opportunity specifically for folks that work with LifeBridge, but there are opportunities to expand that. So I'll share the link to that in the chat. And if folks have questions, I'll also share my email.
Thank you, Ashley. That's really helpful. Any other comments before we move on to weaknesses?
One more for you, Sophie. I mentioned this as a strength the last time. I forget where I think it was on transportation. But that's just, you know, again, this is coming from the perspective of somebody that has knocked on thousands of, you know, I ran for county council and just knocked on thousands of doors in this community, and that there's a legitimate interest in gently increasing the density. Certainly you come across your NIMBYs that are like, oh, I don't want any change and things like that. But, you know, so many people, whether it's an older resident in a large home and you're talking to them about finding a way by allowing an accessory dwelling unit by right on their property so that they can live in that and then rent out their larger home for additional income, or somebody that lives near an ailing commercial corridor and they would like to see that revitalized and that they are okay with the increased density if that means that it will help slow down traffic to make it more bikeable and walkable and give them some, you know, quality of life amenities near their house. There's just a really strong willingness there with a lot of people, I think, to go out and to make these pitches if it's done from a place of, you know, earnestness, you know, being really earnest and sincere about how it will benefit people.
Yeah, education is an important thing to talk about. I know we talked about that a lot with the environment section last week. Any other comments? Nope. All right. Emery, do you want to pull up the screen really quickly? Perfect. So listed on the slide here are the weaknesses from the 2018 plan. The three of them are rental housing is concentrated in certain areas within the sustainable community. There are a few census tracts that have higher vacancy rates, and those tracts are listed here, and I'm completely blanking on where exactly those are, but I'm happy to send out a map of where those are. And then housing within the Beltway and the housing that's closer to the city line tends to be in poor conditions, or the functionality is lacking. So again, feel free to unmute yourself as we kind of start to talk about the weaknesses. Some of the things, again, that were talked about in the survey were a lack of affordable housing, increased homelessness, and a need for more senior housing.
So, Sophie, I'd like to, you know, talk about a little bit with the, you know, we were talking about the auxiliary housing units, and you know, you know, it's been brought up. Paul brought it up. It was brought up in the surveys. And one of the problems we have in Baltimore County is that to have a by right auxiliary housing unit, you have to have 75 feet of street frontage. Plus, you have to have basically on-street parking, off-street parking. This becomes an issue that any modest home is pretty much off limits, and that's areas where where we have an issue where there's not enough affordable housing, where we have an issue where there's not there's issues where people are aging in place, etc. A lot of these homes are not huge, but could easily somebody could have a basement apartment in that home, and it would not be too outlandish. And the thing about that is it would increase density without having to go through a major redevelopment process. I mean, somebody, we could even throw a stipulation to do it by right. It would have to be an owner-occupied home or something along those lines to convert it. I just think that this is something that it's being tried in a lot of other places. California just had a law that was passed statewide that would allow auxiliary dwelling units by right. And I think it's something that we should be looking at here, and it could really help the density, help alleviate the affordable housing crisis, and not really do it. And it would do very little in way of changing the character of the neighborhoods.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think that's a good point to mention. A little bit of a struggle it's a barrier to entry is the main problem.
And so let me add to what Matt just said. So certainly, the large, how the current zoning is a weakness, right? DR2, when we're talking about increasing variety of housing, addressing the missing middle housing, affordable housing, DR2 is not conducive to that. And again, so controversial. And I think, one of our action items needs to be like a multi-year educational push to be like what we mean by this, examples of this, possibly maybe even doing it not just in whole swaths, but investigating what the UK does with a concept called a street vote, where the Department of Planning identifies a street that would be perfect for increasing the density, and then we take it to that street and we give that street the opportunity to, if you choose to, you can increase the density there. If you do choose, there's no compulsion for increasing the density. You can stay as you want, just the way that you are. But when people learn about the financial benefits of that for them personally, they will do that. And then possibly as part of that process, doing visual preference surveys so that people know what this will look like, and then to take it even one step farther and doing like pre-approved design. So once you get over that zoning hurdle and the kind of educational hurdle, now we make the nuts and bolts of how to do it efficiently so that the incremental developers can come in to do things. And right now there's no like our current council person, or I didn't want to say that. I just don't see, other than meetings like this that are, not incredibly well attended, there's not like a really big effort to go out and to identify these places and to start like knocking on doors and move things forward like that. And I think that that's a big weakness that we have to change that. And I'm sorry if I rattled a little bit.
No, you're good. I'm glad you shared. Any other thoughts?
I think it's also kind of worth thinking about the fact that, a lot of these comments were about more affordable housing, and in general, to have more affordable housing, you need more housing. And in general, most of what's in these land boundaries is either already developed or is not developed, and the community would probably prefer to stay that way. So unless we do these zoning changes, you can't accomplish these goals of wanting to improve the affordable housing supply. Like, this is kind of a necessary thing to do. So yeah, we really need to think about not whether or not we want to allow this, but how to allow this in the best way for the community. And, sometimes I see things like the very big development on Thistle Road, for example, which provided a lot of like senior housing. That's great, but we put a big development on this kind of rural road with no sidewalks. And now all of those people, anytime they want to do anything, they have to get in a car and drive, and that makes traffic worse. And that's why anytime any type of denser development gets proposed, all people think about is traffic. Because when we do build these denser developments, we do them in a way that encourages traffic. So how can we do that better? That's important to think about.
I agree with Michael. I mean, we're not working off like a common plan when it comes to this. When it comes to any of our development, we're not saying, it's at some point in every city's life, a planner sat down and said, there's going to be a road here, there's going to be sidewalks here. That's the way that's the way urban planning is done. It has to be done before before the shovel hits the ground. New York, in the 1800s, designated blocks going, hundreds and hundreds of blocks for this purpose. And really, we're urban without having a plan. So we're ending up with situations where, we have developers come in, they build cul-de-sacs, they don't take on any of the traffic load for the community. And what do? It dumps all the traffic onto the legacy streets, and the residents who are living in the older homes on these legacy streets end up suffering because the new developments don't take on any of that, any of the pain that comes with becoming more dense. And it really, I think we really need to sit down and hammer out an urban plan, and we could just be looking at Catonsville and say, what, maybe we should, instead of treating this as just a piece of the county, we could treat this as more of a township, and there could be development that's built with Frederick Road being the center of the town and working our way out from there, meaning there's going to be sidewalks, there's going to be streets, everything connects, so so that it goes into that center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are some good points. Thank you. Maureen, do you want to go next? I think you're muted. There you go. Go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to move to a condo 13 years ago, and found that there's only 3 condo situations in the 21228 area. And one is the one that Michael was talking about, that has no sidewalks and everybody has to drive, and we wanted walkable. The first one's behind the Atlantic, and it has no sidewalks and you'll have to drive. And the second one is in Westchester. I think they've got about 90 units there, and it's not really walkable to shopping. We ended up on Wilkins Avenue near the Beltway for an 84 unit condo, but we can walk to the Giant, we can walk to places. So it's the best we could find. So we really, really need condos in Catonsville. And we were hoping that somebody would build some soon. The Armory would be where the Armory has been abandoned. That would be a great place to have condos. And, my husband and I were in Catonsville when we were looking for a condo, and we said, this is where we would love to have a condo, right in the middle of town. We could get up and walk. So we really, really do need condos. The problem is that whenever anything tries to be rezoned, or these multifamily units, the town goes crazy. They want no affordable housing. And the other thing, another problem is that the schools are very overcrowded. So when developers are trying to build something, they have to build them as over 55 so that there's no kids involved and they don't have to deal with that issue. So there's a lot of obstacles in Catonsville to getting affordable housing and to building multifamily. People view that as a lesser real estate status, and they don't want it in their community.
Mhm. Yeah, those are some really good points. Mike, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think to that point, we really can't. If our strategy is to rezone these lots bit by bit, then it's never gonna happen. We just have to, you know, think about where we would want denser development and rezone things so some of these medium density developments are just allowed by right, in that every single project doesn't have to be fought tooth and nail, right? Like we want to put apartments in an abandoned warehouse, and it's the biggest controversy in the world that people want to do that because it has to be rezoned. If it didn't have to be rezoned, it would just happen because it's, a good thing for the community. And yeah, this like parcel by parcel rezoning is not going to allow change to happen as fast as I think it'd be the best for it to happen.
Yeah, there hasn't been anything on the comprehensive level that really is going to make any major changes. It would be nice if we were just say, we'll take, and we'll just take your zoning level and just move it up by one notch. We're not going to go crazy with it, but hey, you're in DR2. We'll change it to what was that next one? DR 5.5. Just move up one level, not go crazy with it, but it would be a change that. Okay, so you could go from one house to two houses on the lot. I mean, fact of the matter is, our county went from 315,000 people when the county charter was written, and now we're at 820,000. We have a lot more people, so we've got to accommodate for that.
Mhm.
Well, I think to build off what you're saying, Matt, and I talked about this for the past like year, is that again, people have to understand that we have to grow the tax base, and by growing the tax base by building outward, we're just digging a deeper hole for ourselves. And if we want, and again, I've had so many conversations with people that once you explain this to them, the NIMBYism that Maureen, alluded to, that, sometimes even, like I've been accused of being a NIMBY, like the perspectives change when you say, well, would you like this? They're like, yeah, I'd like that. Well, this is how we'll be able to afford that more. So, I think that one of the weaknesses is that during the main planning or the main procedure for changing zoning, it seems like it's really developer driven and not a lot of being driven by the development, you know, or by the planning department that goes out and does like a 4-year like push to kind of identify places, talk to people, build some support, say that it's ultimately again where the council person is not going to make a decision, but it's going to be more like a street vote. Do the people on that street want that to happen? And this will be the benefit for them if it does happen. And again, nothing like that is happening right now. Everybody reacts to the upzoning instead of being invited to participate in the process. And it's a big weakness.
I think one of the things that hurts the zoning and the housing density issue is the fact that communities that are on the edge of what is considered Catonsville are often, when it comes down to, we're going to talk about redistricting schools, they end up being on the potential chopping block. That ends up creating a lot of folks who don't want there to be development because I speaking from somebody who lives 2 blocks from US 40, they came in, they were like, well, we want to have Woodlawns High School district go all the way down to basically down to Edmonton Avenue. It really riled up folks in the area. And maybe one of the things that could help is maybe a larger high school, there's a larger Catonsville high school, so we can take that on and it becomes a non-issue. There's plenty of seats in the local school. Folks, I know, speaking to residents in my community, that a lot of them spent $100,000 more to live south of US 40 because of the schools. So, I mean, it's something that we really need to be cognizant of in all this. I mean, it's great a developer wants to come in and build, and I think there would be a lot more support if, if every five years or so, they don't start talking about redistricting the middle and high schools.
Mhm. Yeah, there are a lot of layers when it comes to housing value and where people decide to live. Any other thoughts? One thing that nobody brought up yet, not so much of a weakness, but a challenge that I think I've noticed with historic homes. Old homes need a lot of repairs, and sometimes that can be a challenge for people to age in place and a challenge for people that want to buy those homes but may not be able to afford the repairs that they need but could afford the home itself. So that's not so much a weakness because I think historic homes make a community really fun to be in, but it's definitely a challenge that I think should be considered. But yeah, just wanted to share that really quickly. And I think we've already kind of gotten into talking about some of the outcomes that we want to see. So, Emery, do you want to pull up the screen? Perfect. So the 2018 action plan listed 2 outcomes, pretty broad. The first one was to improve housing conditions in areas that had higher rates of rental properties or housing that is in deficient condition, and target those residential renovations. And the second one was to ensure quality, affordable housing options are available. One of the strategies, just to quickly note for that one, was to complete Winters Lane projects with St. Ambrose Housing Aid, which were completed, and there were, I believe, 10 residential renovations along Winters Lane, so that's really good. And then the other one was to utilize county money that had been dedicated for hard units of affordable housing. And unfortunately, that's not something that I have an update on, but that's definitely something that can be discussed. So we can take the screen down, and if anybody has any thoughts on those specific outcomes or things to add. I know we already kind of talked a lot about things that want to be changed.
I'd like to see our busy streets have more streetscaping, something, that especially our residential streets. I go down Ingleside Avenue, I go down Edmondson Avenue, I go down Rolling Road, and it's just, the amount of the lack thereof just of any cohesion, anything that it looks like it's just kind of forgotten about by the county, especially like Ingleside between like Edmondson Avenue and US 40. You get up near US 40, it turns into a 4-lane highway, concrete medians. You go south of there, and you have the road coming into people's yards. Broken up asphalt everywhere. There's I know that the county's going to be working on like curb and gutter and sidewalk, eventually, but there needs to be something more that's being done with that. I mean, the houses there, they're pretty large. They could really have a lot more potential value, and potentially could be a better asset when it comes to tax value and create, and a lot of the houses are big enough they could become multi-unit. And it's kind of a disinvestment when you ride down, you see the condition that the community is left in. I mean, Rolling Road's the same way. You have, I don't know how there's homes there you can't even see because the weeds have grown 30 feet tall, and they go all the way to the side of the narrow road. It's I think we need to work on some streetscaping. Route 40, same thing. I mean, people come out of Baltimore City, this is the first thing they see of Catonsville. Like this should be like, hey, this is a highway and there's gonna be a lot of people here, but it looks nice. Maybe I'll drive off here and see what there's a house for sale down there. This might be a community I'd like to live in. It's easy to commute from here, etc. I think we really need to think about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I see, Mike, you commented in the chat, there's money in the 2023 budget for Ingleside. Not sure what's planned. I am also not sure what's planned. That's something I can definitely look into and see what's going on. And hopefully that's something we can incorporate into our action plan. That sounds.
A lot of that is the approved a rollout of sidewalks and curb and gutter,
Okay.
but that's supposed to be over several years. I can tell you as the community president that that's what's going on here, but you know that we haven't seen the finalized plan yet, and it's good to hear that it's in the budget. But it would be nice on top of that, that it's more than just that. I mean, there's a lot of that could really be cleaned up and made to be a gateway into Catonsville. Maybe even some signs like "Welcome to Catonsville" when you cross over Route 40 or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are good ideas.
Sophie, maybe we can do kind of like, maybe for 2023 to do some sort, public awareness campaign of, what affordable housing is. Again, I think Maureen hit the nail square on the head. A lot of people hear that and their mind goes to like a fearful place, the worst possible situation for what they deem affordable housing could be. But the reality of it is that so many people have it and it's already here and it's a real nice amenity to our community. And to start, finding a way, perhaps like in conjunction with the mural tours that Maureen, you guys do with Rails to Trails and things like that, that we could weave in some, the mixed middle, the missing middle housing of Catonsville. Because, a year ago, I never knew what a fourplex was. And when I saw them in Catonsville, I'm like, that's the cutest thing I've ever seen. Look at that. Look at that thing. I wish we had more of those. Or the little, a little bungalow on Rosewood that, I look at a door, I'm like, is that an ADU? Oh yeah, we're grandfathered in. We rent that upstairs. And any problems with that? No, no problems at all, So to do something like that, to just kind of get people, talking about these concepts. And then I know that there's a program that Strong Towns has put, because Strong Towns' whole mission is about this kind of develop without building any new roads. And they've developed something called the Locomotion Tour, that I think it's a 12-part series. It's very affordable that that they have some really great content. It's great content and to start doing things like that. And certainly, if you wanted any help with that, I would love to help with that.
Can I jump in really quick, Sophie?
Yeah.
So thank you, Paul, for sharing. I will share with you, because the HCD is new, we're going about a campaign to sort of rethink how we talk about affordable housing. And so one of the things that we're doing is really shifting the story to the people versus the built environment. Understanding that most of us are 2 or 3 paychecks away from needing some affordability. So we're trying to just shift folks thinking that way, and we're doing it globally in the county. Another thing that we're doing is trying to tie the economic development needs and economic growth to the housing needs. So a couple of you guys said it earlier, like as the county grows, there's a need to create more housing. And so I think if we link the two, our council and other folks will always support that growth. But if you have ideas specific to how we can have this conversation with certain groups, please shoot me an email and I'll share my email address again in the chat.
I think we need to make sure people know what affordable housing is, as Paul said. I mean, it's it's basically anything from the median income and lower. And I mean, that keeping close to the median can be done, and it would be considered affordable housing. And that's I'll tell you that the lack of it is crazy. I mean, I had an apartment, not even a fancy apartment. It was that I advertised on Facebook of all places. And within 4 days, I had like over 100 inquiries about it. Just And it tells me that there's just not enough of that housing to go around. I mean, 100 people are, knocking down your door, looking for a place. We do need to do something.
Hmm.
And Director Lafferty, I'm not sure if you're still listening in on this call or not. I would love for the planning office to kind of try through the county executive's office to make the request that in the next CZMP that we downzone Spring Grove so that when this development happens, it has to be through a PUD plan where then the county can negotiate for affordable units. Right now, if we just upzone these properties and they're included in the sustainable community district, boundaries, they will be able to take advantage of the benefits of that without any commitment whatsoever to any of the affordability mission statements that is inherent within the sustainable community, mission and why we have these things. And I think that it should certainly be downzoned. And indeed, the last CZMP councilperson Quirk refused to upzone parcels for Wayland properties, citing that this is going to be a large process and perhaps this would be better done as a PUD so that, that we can make sure that the community is getting a good deal. And so I think we should think about that. And I know, I don't know if they're supporters of, more than likely our next council person delegate, Pat Young, but to call him and to suggest that he would support that as well, because downzoning it would not mean that no development happens. It would just mean that as a county, as a community, we can negotiate for the benefits that will come from the density of the parcel.
If I may, the only problem with that, Mr. Dongara, is that it is UMBC is a state institution,
Okay.
and state government is not bound by zoning. So even if we downzoned or changed the zoning on Spring Grove, that would not necessarily impact what they could do on the property. It may be a statement, but the council itself would have to ultimately decide whether or not they wanted to make that statement.
Let me get this right. So if UMBC were to sell the land to a developer, let's say Whalen or whoever, they're not bound by the county, not bound by county zoning? I understand if UMBC
No, that's
wants
different.
to build
If they
a
sell the
huge storm
property,
building or something, or but if
that's
they
not
want
what I said, Mr. Reisner. If they sell it to a developer, then that developer is the private owner and he or she or they are bound by zoning. If UMBC retains ownership of the property or the land as a state entity, they are not bound by local zoning.
So could the local zoning be downzoned technically on the county level? So if the state were to sell part of the partial to a developer, that it would follow the county's lower zoning status?
I'm not really following that, but my point is, whomever the owner is, the ownership is the determines it. If Baltimore County owns the property, or the state of Maryland, or the federal government own the property, they're not bound by local zoning laws.
So does that
Private
mean,
developers are.
so,
Private ownership is.
so Mr. Lafferty, does that mean like say the elementary school down the street from me that a skyscraper could be built on that property because the county owns it?
BCPS would not be bound by local zoning.
BCPS would not be bound by local zoning. Okay, interesting. Well, I would still suggest that the sizable acreage that is not owned by UMBC, that's owned by Wayland Properties, that would more than likely be considered the ingress and egress for this project, that could be downzoned to again like hold people's feet to the fire to make sure that we have some workforce housing for UMBC employees, because certainly the janitorial staff and cafeteria staff at UMBC, they deserve a place where they can live, work, and play as well. It's not only for people that can afford to live in places like that. And again, this has been going on for quite a while. I've followed this issue for, my golly, it's pushing on like a decade and a half. And I think that it's time that we make sure that whether it is the pedestrian and bicycle connections between UMBC and Catonsville, affordable housing, the environmental protections for Herbert Run, there's a lot of issues with this parcel that, again, if we just have office technology and business major zoning, there's not a lot of cards that the community or even the planning department is holding.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that Spring Grove came up. I think that's a really, really important topic for us to discuss and incorporate into our action plan and general discussions. For the sake of time, I am going to move on just to the next topic, if that's all right.
Excuse me, Sophie.
Yep.
I know you have noticed, but Monica has had her hand raised for a long time. If you could just give her a chance.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Monica, go ahead.
I'll be quick. I just want to put artist housing in the notes of outcomes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's a really good idea. And that's something we can talk about more too in the quality of life. I know that's a really upcoming topic. And really quickly before I have the call-in user speak, I just wanted to mention that Justin mentioned in the chat that the Inflation Reduction Act passed this year will have money to help homeowners with retrofits in the beginning of 2023. I think that's a good thing to mention. And then if I only see the first couple digits, but it's 443220 if you want to unmute and share.
Okay, good. Hi, this is Darlene. I'm with Community Assistance Network, and let me compliment you all for your input and the ideas that are absolutely wonderful. One of my questions would be, and I'm located here on the grounds of Spring Grove. We have the shelter down here, and I serve as the housing lead for housing placement among our groups that are here. Is there any plans in the books for, let's say, co-op housing in the Catonsville area?
I am not sure, but maybe Ashley, you would have a sense of that. If not, I can look into it.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Yeah.
So to respond to that question, we don't have any co-op specific deals in a pipeline right now, but that doesn't mean that they're off the table. So we're willing to explore any and every option for affordable housing in the county.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Great. All right. Well, I think on that note, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to local planning and land use. I know we already kind of got into that a little bit. There's a lot of crossover there, especially with housing zoning. So again, it's the same format. This section is primarily concerned with the local government's ability to plan for the community's future and meet the needs of residents. Some of the things that can be talked about are updating zoning ordinances and land use, updating local policies, which I know can be a little bit difficult since we're in a county setting. Taxes and fees, increasing local government capacity or organizational capacity, and updating planning documents. You can go to the next slide. Again, same thing. How would you revise it? What do you think of the current statements? And so on. Go ahead to the next slide. So again, with the survey takeaways, many of the strengths that people mentioned were Catonsville's amenities engaged existing local organizations, the arts district, and preservation of historic character. Some of the weaknesses, some of those organizations that used to exist have no longer exist or do not operate anymore. A need for improved communication between the council and the public about community issues, the sustainable community boundary, not including all of Catonsville's primary neighborhoods. So hopefully we're responding to that a little bit by including that Ingleside pocket, and then a lack of enforcement zoning issues. Some of the outcomes that people chose to write in were protecting historic communities, addressing conditions within the Beltway by strengthening commercial areas and improving residential areas, allowing ADUs and lessening those setback requirements, which I know we talked about a little bit already, preventing sprawl, supporting environmental planning efforts, and focusing on revitalization and maintaining that infrastructure. And then the last one was to increase communication with UMBC, which I think we've touched on a little bit. So the one strength from the existing plan was that the overall land use pattern and zoning support a healthy and successful commercial core. And again, some of the things that survey takers have already said were amenities, engaged local organizations, and the arts district. So if anybody wants to chime in, and we can kind of go through the strengths and then hop into the weaknesses and the outcomes.
I would say with the strength, one of the things that really helps us is that with the community, with Catonsville being as old as it is, a lot of our main streets, especially our east-west streets, those are a nice, healthy framework for a grid, like Edmondson, US 40, Frederick Road, Wilkins Avenue. You know, it really helps with the with urbanization in the area.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Darlene, I see your hand is still raised. I'm not sure if you had an additional comment or if that was left over from before.
Certainly that we have these kind of little commercial, core areas, and not just, Main Street, Catonsville from South Rolling to the Beltway, but Paradise, Ingleside, and Edmondson, Edmondson and the city line, and even Route 40. Those are really nice that we already have those commercial zonings in place that are right in close proximity to residential neighborhoods. And if we could make it, a little bit more walkable and bikeable and slow down the traffic and have a more shared street model, and to redevelop those areas, I mean, I think it's, Dutton and Edmondson is another area. Even the Oella General Store and the Breadery and Truths, that little area possibly in there. That's certainly a really nice strength. And then the other thing that's, a strength is that, we do have a process in place for changing zoning, with the CZMP and then the master planning process. So, we do have these opportunities to kind of look at land use and change things. And again, I think a lot of people that are interested in having these discussions.
Mm-hmm. The master plan should be for 2030 should be released either in the winter or the spring, so it's coming soon. So that's good. Any other comments? Great. I think we'll go ahead and just move on to the weaknesses and the outcomes. Again, there was only one weakness listed in the previous action plan, a relative scarcity of undeveloped properties within both residential and commercial areas, limiting the potential for large scale new development. And I think that's something we already touched on a little bit. Some of the things that, again, people said in the survey, some of the organizations had ceased operations. There was a need for improved communication with both Baltimore County government and the council and UNBC, and including those other Catonsville neighborhoods that had been excluded in the past. So you can, yeah, perfect. If anyone wants to chime in, then go ahead. Patricia, go ahead. Thanks for joining.
This might have been addressed earlier, but how do we get Academy Heights included in this community?
Yeah, so Academy Heights and the Ingleside neighborhood right there, and I know Matthew has his hand raised to talk about it a little bit. That is part of our proposed expansion area for the sustainable boundary, so we can include those neighborhoods in our discussion topics. Ultimately, it will be up to the state whether to approve it or not once it gets to that, once we fill out the application and all and then submit it. But that is part of our plan now, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Matthew, go ahead.
I think, you know, as I said earlier, I think one of our biggest issues is just the planning that we have going forward. You know, really creating a model where things are well connected and where you know folks can walk to things that are nearby, and you know, and on top of it, we have you know, we have these corridors like Route 40 that you know, they really, we need to have a plan when it comes to redevelopment. If I don't know if you guys have probably drove down Route 40. Have you noticed how things have gone from, you know, from mid-level to retail, and it just going lower and lower. Like now you have a bunch of you know, storage places. We went from new car retail to used car retail. You know, we went from having a bowling alley to having a one of the biggest body shops in the state. You know, so I mean, it really, we need something to help keep that slide from continuing. I mean, the thing about Route 40, it has all the land is already has the zoning by right to have what, for example, they want to have down you know, down there in Spring Grove. You know, they already have the by right zoning, and you know, there's a lot more blessing and goodwill if they wanted to redevelop that. But instead, we're dealing with a model where we're, you know, abandoning what we have already, you know, the land has already been used, and you know, going and trying to develop the little virgin land we have.
Mike, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I have my own comment, but I also want to build off Matthew's comment about Route 40. You know, MDOT or MTA is seriously looking at expanding rapid transit along Route 40, and it would be in the county's best interest to, and like maybe you are, I don't know, but get them at best interest to plan for that, right? And to be ready for when we have rapid transit between Route 40 and Baltimore, to take advantage of the people who can come to our community on that transit, but also take advantage of the people who can live in our community because of that transit. And I think that's a really big opportunity for that corridor. And it'd be a shame if the ball's dropped there. And I guess sort of following up similarly, sometimes it's frustrating as a citizen who's not involved in government at all. Is, you know, we had all of these master plan meetings last year, which were the 2030 master plan meetings happening in 2021, and you know, now it's 2022. We have the CZMP, we have these meetings, it seems like there's a lot of planning going on, and it's hard to see how these different efforts work together. And it's not clear as an outsider how much coordination there is, right? There was just the bike and pedestrian master plan draft came out, but like how much is that working with the sustainable community initiatives, working with the master plan, working with the CZMP, right? Because all of these things, and it, you know, we keep coming back to the same set of core topics. So all these things are related, and it's not always clear how much interoperability there are between these initiatives to take advantage of things where they can work together. Yeah.
Paul, do you want to go next?
Oh yeah, there's someone else with their hand up.
Oh.
I feel like I'm bogarting the call-in user.
Oh, yes. Darlene, I'm not sure. do you have anything to share? I'm not sure if your hand is raised from before or not. No? Okay. I'll go ahead.
So, something that jumps out, let me put my hand down. Something that jumped out to me when it's kind of like the weakness in the weakness, right? That when we say that a weakness is that we're all built out, okay, and there's no large parcels for large scale development. Yet previously I said we have incredible potential for incremental development and two different fundamental different approaches to development and addressing housing issues and dealing with land use issues. And it seems as though within the county that there is no interest to help facilitate incremental development, that all of the onus and focus is on the large transformational projects when we acknowledge that we don't have a lot of land for that. So it's kind of like the writing's right on the wall that, one of the biggest weaknesses is that we're just not seeing the elephant in the room here, that we keep focusing on large transformational projects instead of incremental development, which incidentally has been the keystone of building almost every great place that has ever been. So that's one thing. And then the second thing, on a little bit more of a jaded note, and everybody's talking about planning and everything. And I think that I want all of the planning people that work in the planning department here to know that, like, I'm rooting for you guys. And a lot of people are rooting for you, because I believe that a lot of our problem is that this planning process has been hijacked by spot zoning. And that's widely agreed upon with a lot of people that are, land use activists. And, and hopefully perhaps something can change with that in the future. So there you go.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Really quickly, Mike in the chat said, with regards to incremental development, there are a lot of vacant storefronts on Frederick Road that could do a lot of good. Yes. Matthew, do you want to go next?
Yes. One thing that really gets me with this is that, talking about the land that we have, there's a lot of land, there's a lot of partials that the county owns at this point. When you start pulling out the maps, you'll start noticing, especially along stream beds, behind public buildings, there's certain like flood zones, etc. There's land, there's connected lots throughout a lot of Catonsville, and I think it would be very valuable to create, was a pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure in those areas, create parks in those areas. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if there's a flood risk, the county, the land is going to be hard for a developer, A, to be able to get a bank behind, and B, it would be better served as something that, hey, if a park gets flooded out, you rebuild. It's one thing if it's somebody's house there, it's a whole different animal. So I really think that we need to think about these areas where the county already has their hand on a deed. And the problem that we run into is that, the different departments of the county are the ones who hold this. There's no central, no audit that says, okay, let's see all the land that the county holds and try to come up with new uses for that land. Community uses. Let's come up with areas that are become transition areas. So we have a commercial area and next to a residential area, but what do we have in between? We have a wooded lot that people are dumping in, things like that. We need to start thinking about, what the county already can do with the land that it has, and this would, at that point, the county doesn't have to go and purchase it. They already have the deed. It's something that really could help improve the quality of life in Catonsville overall.
Yeah, I think maintenance of properties like that, I think, is a very common sentiment. that would be agreed with.
I would say make it for public use. I think that that's
Yeah.
more so than just, maintenance. Yes, it's falling apart, but maybe, hey, why don't we put a paved trail through there that connects that connects Route 40 to Edmondson Avenue or something like that. That's that would be a public good.
Mm-hmm.
I know behind Westtown there's a lot of land like that, Westtown Elementary. So I mean, if you're looking for stuff within that area for the proposed expansion, that would be, a good spot to look.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. Any other thoughts before we transition to outcomes? No? All right. So, again, only one outcome listed from the 2018 plan, providing suitable opportunities for growth while protecting established neighborhoods. Some of the strategies that were mentioned were utilizing the 2020 CZMP, the providing suitable incentives for key projects, and considering potential expansion of the commercial core, which is basically 144, and then I think Edmondson Avenue is included. I can send a map of that as well. So you can take the screen down, Emery. So yeah, any thoughts on that? Paul, go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
Can you go back to that screen with the outcome?
Yeah, sure. Emery, can you pull that up?
Great. So, again, I think that there needs to be provide suitable opportunities for growth while at the same time protecting the character of established neighborhoods. Again, that's a little bit counterintuitive to, again, this kind of notion of an evolving community, incremental development, building off of previous infrastructure in a way that's a little bit more gentle than large scale development. I'm not sure the language that has to go in there, but to me that reads like, well, let's look for opportunities for growth, but at the same time, we want to protect the character, meaning we want to keep everything in these older neighborhoods exactly like they are. And that's called stagnation that leads to decline. That's not a good place to be in. So anyway, there you go. And maybe that's through strategies and action items to have visual preference surveys. Again, what could we evolve into? What could a pre-approved accessory dwelling unit look like in a Catonsville 4 square or a bungalow specifically? Like, what could it look like to have a 1-bedroom, accessory dwelling unit, behind my house, behind my neighbor houses? What could these look like? There's been controversy on like Main Street of next to the Orthopedic Associates building. There's a new building that's planned, and in a Facebook group, everybody was up in arms about it because again, it's changing the character. That there's been no like visual preference surveys about what inviting people to participate into this process, what it will look like.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think another outcome, and I think it's probably one of the things that when I go and testify at the budget hearings coming up, is that I think that we need some budget in the planning department to go out to start proselytizing, I mean, for lack of a better word, to start proselytizing some of these ideas. Because again, other than these sporadic meetings every now and then, it's not like a robust ongoing conversation until maybe an election year. The CZMP, certainly it comes up. But we definitely need to start having these discussions a little bit more frequently, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you make a good point. Any other thoughts? I can quickly add that some of the things that have been going on this year are the parking study that we talked about a little bit last week. I think that's a valuable tool that we can kind of utilize those recommendations. And then Monica, I'm not sure if you want to chime in. I know you're working on kind of an arts plan to think about arts in the downtown area of Catonsville. So I think those are some of the two outcomes that I know, or strategies that I know are happening now. So just wanted to share that.
Do you want me to say something?
If you want to share what you've been
I do actually. The Catonsville Historical Society has, parceled out. We got a grant from them to do a extensive and engagement and study of Catonsville, and our consultants were here at the beginning of last month, and they just left, and hopefully we did our best to get the word out about that. If you do want to talk to them, that is still possible, but really engaging like all aspects of Catonsville and the different communities that are here to see what that entails and how to incorporate all the essence of and history of Catonsville to create effective public art that sort of builds on what we have here, and not just like sculptures and that kind of thing, but public engagement, and certainly working with sort of the sustainable piece as a sustainable community, and just all the different aspects that are happening in Catonsville. So it's been a really exciting process, and I think that it's going to be a really good foundation for a lot of the things you're even talking about, even in terms of possible traffic stuff and just all and parks and that kind of thing. So I think it'll be pretty all inclusive. So
yeah, thank you for sharing that update. Appreciate it. Any other thoughts? All right. Well, I think on that note, we can end a few minutes early. And again, if you have anything else to share that comes up later after the meeting or in 2 weeks, feel free to email me and say whatever you want to say. Our next and final work group meeting will be next Thursday, focusing on economy and quality of life. So two very big, all-encompassing topics. The survey that will go out for today's meeting will be live starting next week. And the environment and transportation survey is now available online and in person at the Catonsville Library and Senior Center. So be sure to fill those out. That's based on what we talked about last week. And feel free to share with your groups and neighbors. As many people that can take the survey as possible is great to get the most input. Emery, you can go to the next slide. This is if you scan this with your phone, you can go directly to the survey if you'd like to. And then the next slide just kind of shows our main website. So you can also access the survey there as well. So on that note, I think we are done for the night. Again, I really appreciate you all coming out and participating. I think we had a really robust conversation. So I appreciate all of you joining us, and I hope to see you next week.
thank you.